Today, we are here for the first of a series of initiatives that the European Union Center wants to organize with NGOs that work with refugees and generally speaking, people in need from Ukraine. We, of course, need to talk about the war. We need to talk about the conflict, but there is a side of the conflict that is directly impacting the life of many, many innocent people. And we want to start from one of these stories, one that somehow is almost personal to me, not directly, but through my advisor as a college undergraduate in history in Italy a long time ago at the University of Pavia. One of my advisors, Elisa Signori, professor in Italian contemporary history, had a son who in 2014, his name was Andy O'Kelly, went to Ukraine to document the so-called the revolution that ousted the pro-Russian government at the time, and found himself documenting the conflict that started back then, particularly in eastern Ukraine, trying to show the human sufferings that the conflict was causing, and I think as a photo reporter, doing a story on two friends who had ended up on two different sides of the conflict. Andy O'Kelly was targeted. I don't know exactly why, for something he had photographed, or something he had said, for something I really cannot imagine. And he became the victim of an assassination, and he died in eastern Ukraine, which of course changed the life of my college advisor and her family, and the many people who had known Andy O'Kelly. So I had a sort of personal connection, and when I reached out to my advisor to sort of say, this is so terrible today, and how much this must remind you of your personal tragedy within the context of this gigantic human tragedy, she immediately put me in contact with one of the organizations that her son was documenting at the time, and one of the organizations that she thought was doing a great job helping internationally victims and people who, without fault of their own, were caught in the middle of this conflict. And so I reached out to this organization. The name of the organization is Soleterre, and Stefano Oltolini, who is here today to present, was kind enough to take some of his precious time today to come and present what his organization is doing. Hopefully, I hope that everybody who is willing and considering way to help Ukraine by now would consider, again, helping organizations like Stefano's organization that regardless of what you think about the conflict, are really, really trying to help innocent victims on the ground. So I met with Stefano, who has a very, very long experience working with NGOs and with foundations. And through this long experience, he has worked all over the world. We have a master in European studies, and many of our students always want to work with NGOs because they really want to have the same kind of meaningful experience that Stefano has had in his life, going from South America to Eastern Europe, to Africa, to Europe, to help people through his organizational and humanitarian skills. Stefano is currently in charge of coordinating the situation in Ukraine. And so we are going to conduct the first part of this presentation as an interview. Then we'll have also a few slides. I will ask Stefano a few very open questions to let him talk about the organization. Then again, we'll put on some slides to give you also a visual perspective of the organization. And then, of course, there will be plenty of space for everybody to ask questions about Soleterre's activities, the situation in Ukraine, and so on and so forth. This is an event that, like others, has been coordinated with the Illinois Global Institute and with our colleagues in Russian and Eastern European, the Eastern European Center, our colleagues in Greece. They are maintaining a website where all the initiatives that we are conducting on Ukraine can be accessed and verified. We're grateful for all the help we are receiving. I'm also personally grateful to Sidney Lazarus and Jonathan Larson and Kimberly Fleming, who have been, of course, as always, instrumental in making this possible. So now, without further ado, let me perhaps give the floor to Stefano, who can, again, perhaps say a few things about himself too. I mean, we didn't plan this, but perhaps you can say how you got involved with the world of the NGOs in general before we make it to Ukraine.
Yes, thank you very much, Emmanuel, for the space. Thank you, everyone, for your attention. And thank you also for this lovely memory of Andy Rocchelli. He was a very close friend of the organization, very close friend of our president. And the day he died, we were together in the same place. I mean, he was based in our office in Ukraine, and he left that morning, and he never came back. So thank you very much also to remember him. Now, something about me, and thank you very much for this space, and then we go straight in what we do. But I think it's important also to listen a little bit to the different paths of person that are working in this sector. Now I'm turning now 24 years of experience, and I've started as a very young assistant in an NGO working in the Balkans. I do have a degree in international relations with a focus on the Balkans. So at that time, Balkans was meaning mainly Albania, then Bosnia, of course, and then Kosovo. So I was exactly beginning my career in those years. And for many reasons, well, I took responsibility quite soon. I went to Albania, and I had to coordinate the evacuation of people fleeing from Kosovo to Albania. So it was a period of somehow similar to what we are living these days. Now that period is also important for the beginning of Soleterre, because Soleterre is turning 20 years of experience this year, so we have 20 years, and the original group of founders, which I'm a part of them, really met during the war of Kosovo and the experiences that we were facing in the Balkans. And at daytime, we were working for another NGO. At nighttime, we were planning our own NGO, meaning and willing to improve and increase even the effectiveness of our work. So we became friends, and the group of 6 decided to create a new organization named Soleterre. Now you're not familiar with Italian, but I can help you. Sole means sun, terre means lands. So in one sense, we wanted to bring a ray of light of the sun to land, but at the same time, Soleterre means also the lonely lands. And again, the idea was to play a little bit on the meaning of try to do our best to go in those places that were not targeted by big international cooperation. Those people who were neglected, those communities who were left behind. So that was the idea, and that is still our idea. Since that time, I've been, sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Thank you. Since that time, the organization has been growing, and something very important that we have to say is about the typology of intervention that we do and where we do. Since the early days, we've decided to focus on children with cancer, and the first country was Ukraine. So really, our experience in the country is quite wide, and in these 19 years of experience in Ukraine, we've been facing a lot of challenges. Of course, this current one is the most challenging one, of course, no doubt about that. Our, let's say, signature program is called Great Against Cancer. Is based in Ukraine, of course, in Italy too, but not only. We are also working in 6 other countries, mainly in sub-Saharan Africa, because the issue of life expectation for children facing cancer is very different depending where you're born and depending if you can access or not a top-level medical service. So just to give you some very, very raw numbers, in a Western country like US or Italy, children with cancer has from 80% to 90% possibility to be alive after 5 years from the diagnosis. Now, these numbers are completely different in places like Africa or even Ukraine 20 years ago. We are talking about Ukraine, for example. 20 years ago, you had only 40% of possibilities to be alive after 5 years of the diagnosis. Thanks to a lot of work from a lot of organizations, including Soleterre, these numbers have been improving in Ukraine, and now the life expectation after 5 years is higher, is above 65%. However, Ukraine, also because of Chernobyl, you all remember the nuclear disaster of Chernobyl, has numbers that are higher compared to other countries similar size in the number of newborn with cancer. So the numbers that we're facing are quite demanding.
Thank you so much. So again, we just heard the connection between, of course, the situation after Chernobyl and the decision to help children with cancer in Ukraine. So can you talk about that a little bit more concretely? What kind of help do you provide in this area?
Yes. Now, before this war, our work is extremely important in what we can call the socio-economic attention to families with cancer. I mean, when you face and you fight cancer, the medical solution, of course, came first, is always coming first. So we partner with the best and top oncological hospitals in the world and in Ukraine too. So we are working in Kiev with the National Institute of Cancer, and we are working in Lviv. In Italian, it's called Leopoli, but in international knowledge now is very known as Lviv. That is an important city quite close to the border of Poland. And there we are working with the most important pediatric oncological hospital. But providing drugs and training and increase the capacity is only part of the solution. Now, the part that is more in charge of us is also to take care of the families, listen to all their needs. For example, one of the most important needs is to provide family homes. That means a safe and free of cost place close to the hospital. So families, no matter how poor they are by an economic point of view, they can access the best quality cure treatment in their country. So we are doing this in all the countries in which we are working. We provide free accommodation. And when we provide free accommodation, of course, we provide other services like psychological support, for example. That's incredibly important for families and for children to, well, to stay close to them along the old path of fighting cancer that sometimes can be extremely painful, as you can imagine. So our role is important and is still very important also when a dramatic crisis like this war is happening, because families are needing any kind of support, and sometimes support of simply as being part of an organization, being part of a group. The first day that the bombs started to beat the area close to Lviv, close to Kiev. Now the families were completely frightened. They couldn't not even decide about what was best to do. Go to the hospital, go back to their villages, stay at our family home. So the fact of at least stay together and spend together the first 2 or 3 nights to understand if this invasion was going to stop or to continue, they have been extremely important. And so this is what we do when we work close to the hospital. We stay close to the families, and we try to provide them free accommodation, psychological support, and any kind of economic and social support that they need.
Thank you so much. Can I ask you about the structure of the organization again? How many people you had there? How do you organize the activities, and how many branches you have also around the world?
Yeah, we are an international NGO with headquarters in Italy. That means that we are around 20 people working in Italy and around 20 other people working in projects. They say project assigned, so they're all project managers. In Ukraine and also in other countries where we've been working, now we also push very much for the creation of autonomous civil society organization. We strongly believe that only people in their own country, they can be the real change makers for their future. So in Ukraine, for example, the first group of employers of Soleterre then was supported by us in create their own organization, and they did it in a great way. And today we have an organization called Zaporuka Foundation in Ukraine. That is a legal body of Ukrainian law, and we are very proud of that. They are absolutely autonomous, but we are partner. So we're very close partner, and of course we provide assistance, financial and technical in any case. But this partnership has demonstrated to be real, especially these days that we are facing the war. So we've been working side by side with them, and we are the same family, the same group. But we're also very proud because we can see the future of any country in which we are working in by the fact that our colleagues are really creating the possibility for a local, real organization. And again, I use this expression that is really change-making organization. So this is the situation the day before the war. I don't know, Manuel, if you want, maybe also we can go so in describing the first action and the first results of these days. Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
please.
Yeah. Now, with this preamble about what we do in Ukraine and the style in which we like to do cooperation. Now I have to bring you in the chronicle of these terrible days, because again, the first night in Kiev, the impression was that the Russians were not going to invade the country. But maybe it was just a sort of I don't know, little defined war in the eastern part, of course, but not touching Kiev. Nobody was expecting what later became a reality. So the first night we took all the families, we went to the main hospital that we work with. And the idea was, well, to provide for them a safer place compared to our facility that is a lovely house with 8 apartments, but of course with no shelters for bombings. Now the hospital, the first night, we discovered that they had shelters, but not enough for everyone. And also the pediatric oncology was on the 4th and 5th floor. So the second night, when the situation was getting worse and worse, and people start talking about a possible invasion, now we had to devise a completely different plan. So the first plan was to evacuate at least the first who were able to move immediately towards Lviv. And here maybe I'm asking your colleagues to put the map. Would be great maybe to have a map. So maybe I help you a little bit to understand where we are talking about and the distance that are involved. So Kiev more or less is in the middle of Ukraine, and the more you go east, and the more the war has become worse and worse, because you know the two autonomous republics that the Russians said they are going to help with this special operation, as they call it, they are situated on the eastern part. So it's quite normal that all the people now are fleeing west. And Leopoli, Lviv, is really now the new capital. All the embassies and all the political, diplomatic entities have moved to Lviv, including the Italian and US embassy, of course. And so we did the same with oncological children, with the difference, of course, that moving oncological children is really a challenge. So a first group on the third day went to Thermopylae, that is a little before Leopoli, Lviv, and then in close connection with the hospital of Lviv, we were able to accommodate these people and children and families in Lviv. But then, of course, all other people, not only from Kiev, from all the region of Ukraine where the war was expanding, are now moving towards the borders. And the idea is to go to Poland, because Poland is the easiest and the more secure way to arrive in Europe. So that border that is very close to Lviv is now very crowded with a lot of people. So Lviv also was not able to accommodate all the children, oncological children and families. So we had to do something else. We had to create a corridor from Poland, from the city of Rzeszów, that is just after the border. We've been creating a flight corridor, a flight organized transport to Milan. And this operation is still going on. Up to now, we have already performed 4 different flights. They are medical flights and with strict rules, of course. And we are working in coordination with an international operation. By the way, there's also American organization working in this, St. Jude Global. They're providing great assistance and coordination. But for Italy, at least for Italy, the point of reference is Soleterre and the Italian medical system that is providing aircraft and support. So this is really the operation that we're living these days. This operation is going to become bigger and bigger next week. There's already 3 flights already planned. The flights are not very big because we're always talking about children with cancer. So for each of them, you need to devise in advance exactly a plan for assistance, medical assistance in a top-level hospital in Italy who is well suited for the type of cancer that the child is facing. And then another issue is connected to logistics, of course, because this kind of flights can accommodate only one mother and one child. They are medical. So we have to take care also of the rest of the families that are mainly siblings and grandmothers. No men, unfortunately, because this is something said. I don't know if you are aware of this, but there's the martial law now in Ukraine. So all the men from 18 till 65, they cannot leave the country. They must remain and be prepared for war. That means for an oncological family, another division, another breaking up in their situation. So this is again another challenge by a social point of view that we are trying to face, because we need to provide also assistance to the rest of the family and not only to the child. Numbers, a few numbers. Up to now, we're creating flights with 6 children and 6 mothers each, plus a special flight for a patient who had to lay down during transportation. So there was another medical special flight that was carrying only him. So we're very close to 20 already saved in Italy, and several hundreds that are now in Poland, already safe in Poland, but they are in the process of being relocated in different countries, including US, Germany, Spain, and Canada, and of course, including Italy, thanks to our operation. So this is the situation up to now. The numbers are important, but the numbers that we are expecting for next week are worse. Just to give you some number, every year, an average of 1,500 newborns with cancer are born every year in Ukraine. That means that we are talking about probably 10,000 children with cancer that are somehow looking for their safe future in Western Europe. So there's a lot of people that are moving towards the borders, and in the next few weeks, there will be an enormous, massive operation to implement.
Thank you. Thank you for the important information. Can I ask a question about the coordination of the evacuation? Are you working with other NGOs? Is there a central coordination? Is the High Commissary of the United Nations for Refugees working with NGOs, providing coordination? Anything you can tell us about, again, this sort of NGOs working together with governments, among NGOs, to solve the terrifying refugee crisis that we are already experiencing?
Yeah. Well, our experience is very much focused on pediatric oncology. And yes, I can say the coordination was great, mainly towards NGOs like ours that are focused, and so they have the background and the experience, and the hospital system. Let's say every country, like Italy, has a national society of oncohematologists, of course, and they are well connected as a network. And so, yes, by a point of view of coordination, I'm very happy. Also, St. Jude Global, again, that is a US-based organization, they've been providing a lot of support in terms of organization. They have created a central hub in the middle of Poland, together with the Polish government. So the vast majority of oncological children are first assessed and have, let's say, at least 2-3 days in Polish hospitals, and then they are redirected in other countries like Italy. This is extremely important. Out of the oncological little portion of the problem, now, yes, there are plenty of NGOs that are now looking for coordination with those UN and European organizations that are well, that are absolutely needed to go over the bottleneck, for example, of logistics. Logistics is a nightmare. Now, there's plenty, an enormous amount of organization and trucks and goods and relief goods assistance at the Polish border, but they cannot enter, not yet, not in a coordinated way. And this is not to blame anyone, it's just that coordination needs time. And now it's very delicate, the issue of having foreign people, not Ukrainian, entering the country. You can enter if you are a journalist, of course, if you are a reporter. There's still a lot of resistance to have the humanitarians going in. It's too dangerous, and probably imagine what can happen if Italians, Germans, Americans get killed by a bombing during an evacuation or during a humanitarian action. So up to now, it's really not open. The border of Ukraine is not open yet to humanitarians. You can do a little, you can do a little with local transport, but the bottleneck is evident. And there are a bigger organization like, of course, the UN, UNHCR or UNICEF, or even OCHA, the coordination system, that are trying to face the problem, of course, and also European Union, they're working very much. But it will require a little bit of time and probably at least a consensus over Ukraine and Russia about this. It's not so automatic, unfortunately, because there's plenty, of course, of NGOs and great people and great experience, of course, ready to enter, but it's still not possible to move in the country, not yet.
Thank you. And I would say my last question before we open the floor to questions from the public. I'm sure that there are many people who have a lot of questions for you. If you talk to the children or to the parents or to people in contact with the children or the parents, how are they mentally processing the situation? Again, they are already sort of thrown around by their illness in hospitals, in sort of complicated situation. What do the parents tell the children? How much are they aware of the war at all? What is this mental state of the parents and the children because of the current situation and the evacuation, assuming it's terrible, but in concrete?
No, thank you, Manuel. It's a good question. And also, Soleterre has an expertise in providing psychological support. Even during COVID, we created teams of really frontline teams in the hospitals, and also tools and methodology that have been used in very different places, from the north of Italy to the north of Uganda, from Kiev to El Salvador. So we do have experience in providing psychological support, and we're using all of this experience because these days are tragic. Imagine nobody was expecting an invasion. Nobody was expecting invasion, not even Ukrainian people. They were fearing an invasion, but nobody was even able to think about how big in the magnitude this invasion was. So even if you have a psychologist in the team, and we do have psychologists in Ukraine, I mean, psychologists, they have also their own life, their own family, and they are losing everything. Our coordinator in Kiev, well, she's a great woman, my age, 2 kids, and plans for the future, like anybody else in the world. Plans to send their kids studying abroad, plans to buy a new home, plans to be more effective in your work. And all of this now is destroyed for these people, including the staff, including the psychologists. So we are doing our best. We are doing our best in listening to people, what they say. Well, the most common comment is that they don't believe this is real. They had to leave everything. And in 3 days, you move from your life to another country and you don't know how long you're going to be resettled in that country. And this is going to change your life completely. Then half of your family probably is still in Ukraine. I mean, again, husbands, they're all stuck in Ukraine. They need to remain and be ready to combat. So this is another issue. And on top of this, it is almost unbelievable. Imagine when you face all of this and you are already fighting cancer. I mean, this is something unbelievable. So the situation is really hard. It's really hard. These women and children, they arrive in Italy or in Poland, and they are completely grateful for what the basic service you are providing, but completely needed of any kind of psychological assistance. And they will need this psychological assistance in a very intensive way for all the weeks ahead and months ahead, probably.
Thank you. And so that actually brings me to another simple question, perhaps not so simple, but that can perhaps also allow us to show the last slide. We kind of forgot about the slides listening to you, and we didn't go ahead. It's my fault. Sorry. But the last question for me, again, before we open it up to the audience, is how can we help? And what can be done to help people who are helping other people and the people on the ground directly?
Yes, thank you, Manuel. We've been opening a fundraising campaign immediately. Of course, we work mainly in Italian on our website, but of course, everybody from any part of the world can make a donation, even straight to our bank account, just simply going on our website, that is soleterre.org. However, especially for US, we've also created a project on global giving, and we are part of the Ukrainian Crisis Fund that was created in global giving. So I guess for US people it's even easier just to go on this link or just type global giving and then look for Soleterre. You will find 2 projects. One is supporting our family homes worldwide that are still open, of course, in Uganda, in Morocco, in Ivory Coast, in Burkina Faso. And the second one that is very specific on Ukraine is to provide immediate relief assistance. And we are already receiving a lot of donation also from the US. And I'm very grateful just for this possibility to talk with you, and so you can spread a little bit the voice and be supportive to us.
Thank you, and I hope that we will be posting, of course, the links on our website. The link was already included in the invitation. Feel free to spread it with friends or whoever feels that somehow this is something they can contribute to. Perhaps again, this is the time when we can ask our guests if there are questions. You can post them in chat, or you can turn on your camera and ask the question directly, whatever you think works best for you. I really see that there is a question in chat that I'm happy to read for the audience. If I can get to there, perhaps not.
Now maybe, Emmanuel, while waiting for a question, and feel free to ask whatever you really prefer. Any question is good in this moment. Also for you, if you are willing one day to do this kind of work, this kind of job, feel free to ask any question that you want. Also, including the training or the kind of formation that you need to have to do this job. I'm very open to respond to any kind of question.
Actually, that's an excellent question that we can use as a starting point. How do you again? What is the training? How do you get personally involved, either as a volunteer or even as a profession in what you do?
Yeah, NGOs are a professional sector, very much organized. Then, of course, the biggest NGOs have a structure that requires very specific position. Smaller NGOs are more in need of persons that are able to switch from different experiences and approach. For example, my experience, I was trained, and in the first years of experience, I was mainly a project manager. That means that you need to be able to deal with timing, deliverables, and goals, and be able to write projects, present them to donors, and be able to report on them. Then during my experience, I've switched also to communication and fundraising in any sense, from very specific fundraising, for example, with global international foundation, to massive actions for a specific market. And of course, you cannot be an expert of everything, but after a while, after 20 years, the managerial role that I'm having right now is a role that needs to know a little bit of everything, and especially during emergency, is able to coordinate people. So able to understand which are the needs and able to find the right solution in terms of personnel and volunteers. We use a lot of volunteers, of course, in order to respond to that need. That was my story. And of course, it's great if at the beginning, the first year, you spend most of your time learning on the field. So I've spent quite a long time in Eastern Europe. Then I changed organization. I've been a part of Soleterre as a voluntary member till a couple of years ago, when I entered as a full-time paid staff. But all the rest of the time, I've been working for big and small NGOs all over the world. As you were saying, I've been working in Africa, a lot of time in Latin America, Central Asia, and the Far East also. And the idea was to, get experience and also always learn something new. That was my story.
Thank you so much. We do have two questions. The first one, again, I think it's a continuation of what you were just saying, asking for specific ways of being useful and helpful in this situation. It comes from Brad Stallone Groyer. She's a therapist with her first year license. English as her first language. And she's not sure if there will be any way for her to volunteer. I assume her, correct me if I'm wrong, if there will be any way for her to volunteer in some capacity. She clearly wants to do something if there is a need and the possibility to do so.
Yeah, the good question. Now, if you're referring to volunteering in the US for people who will arrive from Ukraine yeah, be prepared, because there will be a lot of needs for volunteers. Now, languages are a key issue. To have a mediator in Ukrainian, from Ukrainian to English, for example, would be crucial. So, but at the same time, also, once the operation of hosting a lot of a big number of refugees will come into action also in the US, be sure that there will be a lot of needs. If you were referring to volunteer for Soleterre for this operation, now we don't have much presence in the US. We had a lot of friends, and we don't have much time sometimes, not even to translate our documentation. Also, the presentation I did it myself last night after almost 16 hours of work. So yes, the response can be absolutely ask to Emmanuel for our personal details, and we will be very pleased also to offer the possibility of doing some volunteers from distance, translating, spreading the new of what we do in the US. Then for more specific profile, medical or expert of, let's say, relief assistance, I'm waiting also American NGOs to join the group of NGOs that are already working on the borders. I think it will take a while, but they're going to come for sure. So maybe they could be also another possibility to propose yourself as volunteers.
Thank you. Again, do get in contact with us if you need to, or if you want to help. Jonathan has a question. This kind of evacuation, which is resettlement in other countries, must involve the coordination of so many different actors with specialized skills and resources. For which elements of this was Soleterre best prepared, and which elements has your organization found most unexpected and challenging? Areas
That's
of
an excellent. Sorry.
Yes. No. Sorry.
No, it's an excellent question. Thank you very much. Now, our focus was pediatric oncology, but again, in this evacuation project, our expertise was really to be able to coordinate the Italian response working with an international plan, because as Jonathan was mentioning, coordination at the international level is a key. And again, also in the humanitarian sector, we are great people, but we are different, of course. So, for example, what I learned in my experience is that you need to know the cultural differences of any actor involved, and you need to respect it, and you need to transform it into something that is effective. For example, if you have let's take the example with the St. Jude Global. Again, they did great. We've been the first country, Italy, to be able to move children by flight from Poland to another country. We've been the first, for I don't know which reason, but we've been the first. And the experience that we proposed, that was to have small flights with 6 patients and 6 mothers, with a doctor, a nurse, and a Ukrainian psychologist, was quickly analyzed by the St. Jude Global and took as a model. And so they wrote down very quickly some guidelines for other countries willing to offer support, and they took our experience as a model. And I'm going to have some training for the Spanish, for example, in a few days, because they want to do the same, but they have to understand why it's more important to have small flights instead of big flights. And the reason is that your system of place the kids with cancer in other hospitals will collapse if your numbers are too big. And so if you manage 6, 7, 10 patients per day, it's quite easy relatively easy then to place them into a coordinated system of hospital. If the numbers are too big, then the logistic will fail. It will fail in Poland because there's no space to accommodate 50 children at the same time. And then it will collapse also in the receiving countries because you cannot take 50 children with cancer in this condition at the same time. So again, this is a little good practice that we've been learning at the beginning and we've been sharing, and I'm quite happy that it has been taken as a model.
Thank you. Our colleague, Terry Barnes, wanted to ask a question. You can turn on your, perhaps you can then, yes, I can hear you. Perhaps you can turn off the PowerPoint, Sydney, so we can see Terry. Thank you.
Mr. Oltolini, thank you very much for putting us at the end of very long work days. We really appreciate your time and perspectives. I actually have two questions. One is about the children that you're focusing on. I wonder, do they come from everywhere in the Ukraine, or is the number of children with cancer, is it focused on the old Chernobyl region? That's my first question. And my second is about something as simple as passports. I heard on the news that people were being accepted across the borders if they didn't have visas. But I also know in many, getting a passport itself is can be a very difficult thing, and certainly now. So I'm wondering, how do you deal with a family perhaps where people don't have all the required documents, and what kind of accommodations are being made for people now on that issue? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Teresa, for both questions. Both of them are very interesting. First one, now, if the children with cancer and their families are moving in Ukraine in an organized way, you always can be sure that they have medical records in order and probably also documentation. And now this was the case for the first days when associations like ours were in total control of the people that they were serving. But now the situation is changing because there's a lot of people and families that are coming by themselves, alone. Maybe because they were oncological children, but they were not under any association. And maybe they've been reaching with their car with an extreme high risk, a city that is closer to the border, and then they simply knock at the door of the Lviv hospital or just go straight to the Polish border. And that is a problem. That is a very big problem. Not all of them have their medical records in order. And if you don't know exactly which kind of story by an oncological point of view the patients had, well, it's very difficult then to understand how to deal with it. Passport and documentation is another issue. Now, I have to say that Polish have been great in welcoming people, no matter about their formal or non-formal documentation. And again, for our little experience, we've been great in try to postpone the bureaucratic issues at the moment in which they were already in Italy. And this is our role as NGO. We have to push constriction. We have to push sometimes bureaucratic situation. COVID, that was another issue. Now we had to board kids without being totally sure about their COVID situation. But we did it. We did it because that was the most important things to do. And then, of course, once they were in Italy, of course, we had to apologize with police, we had to apologize with medical staff, but we were very happy that they were in Italy. So sometimes you need to force a little bit the situation. However, this was extremely important as a good learning also for the coordinational body. And so right now they are performing COVID tests immediately on arrival in Poland. And this is extremely important because then you can have a separate route for positive children and separate routes for negative children. So again, every day is a new learning for all the system of coordination, including ourselves.
Thank you. My first question was also about the geography of cancer in Ukraine and whether it's focused on the Chernobyl region or whether it's from the whole country. Thank you.
You're right, Teresa, sorry. Yeah, let's say Chernobyl is north of Kiev, just to put it on a map. And Kiev has the two top level hospital of all Ukraine in terms of oncology. So yes, for sure, most of the oncology cases are coming from that region, also because very often families decide to move to Kiev for all the duration of the treatment. However, the most difficult situation is for those families coming from the eastern part, especially from those two so-called autonomous republic, because in the past 8 years, there has been a war in that area. That is a very problematic area. So if you live in those areas and you have a child with cancer, the possibility to treat him or her locally is quite close to zero. So out of the patients that we were hosting in Kiev, half of them were already coming from the eastern part of Ukraine, because that was already an emergency. But now the situation, of course, is an emergency for everyone. So there are people coming from everywhere. The worst situation now is around Kharkiv, that is on the border with Russia, and is the second largest city in Ukraine, and this city has been bombed since the first day. So everybody's trying to escape. And this is the most worrying situation. Yeah.
Thank you so much. As we already suspecting, as we knew, Stefano is a very generous man. He's also right now a very, very busy man and has many important things to do. And we are very grateful for his participation. I think he's entitled to, again, a little bit of rest perhaps before going back to work. And we are really, really grateful for the work he's doing, for being here today. We remain, again, in any possible way, happy and ready to help with this project and other projects that Soleterre are doing. Thank you so much, Stefano, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Thank you to all of you for the attention, for the willing to go a little bit deeper into this situation, and also for all the action of solidarity that you are going to take, including maybe a support to Soleterre. This is great, but also just also in your ordinary life, do everything you can for this situation. Thank you very much, Emmanuel.